Hi, everyone. Welcome to You Ask, We Answers. My name is Zoe. I am the community and youth organizer here at Women Engaged, and I'm excited for our show today. So, I wanted to go ahead and just go into a couple of campaign updates. So, as of right now, our Get Out the Vote campaign is now up and running. If you would like to volunteer with us, please visit our website at womenengaged.org. The voter registration deadline is April 25th. And thank you guys for always supporting the work we do here at Women Engaged. So I kind of want to get into the background of this episode and our special guest. So in this episode, we will be talking about youth voter advocacy, engaging the youth to continue to break boundaries and how to encourage them in these extremely important upcoming elections. So for our guest today, we have MaryPat Hector. MaryPat Hector, born in Atlanta, is a graduate of Spelman College and a current graduate student at Georgia State University. At 22 years old, MaryPat Hector knows how to change the world. She began community organizing at the age of 12 years old. By the age of 19, she became the youngest woman and person of color to run for public office in the state of Georgia, losing by only 22 votes. MaryPat Hector serves as program strategist at RISE, an organization led by more than 40,000 students and supporters from colleges and universities across the nation. She is also the Georgia Black Youth Vote Coordinator. MaryPat has led and organized hunger strikes that have gained more than 75,000 meals for students at HBCUs, developing an initiative to end student hunger on college campuses. She has also organized rallies to end police violence in communities of color and developed youth entrepreneurship programming that has assisted hundreds of young people to kickstart licensed businesses. And I am happy to introduce MaryPat Hector. Thank you for joining us today. I think you're muted.
Yeah, I was saying you missed two things. One, I am the number one fan of the Zobin Barra fan club, and I love watching You Ask, Answer. So those are the two things that you forgot to say.
Oh, thank you. I am the number one. I'm the president of the MaryPat Hector fan club. I don't know if you knew, but but awesome. I kind of want to get started and ask you, like, how did you get involved with the work, and like, what was your inspiration of getting involved with youth advocacy?
Um, well, yeah, I think like many people of color who are or get involved in this work, it starts from experience and it starts from within community. So I really got involved from just realizing that there needed to be a change or that lacked action within my community. At this time, I was living, or at that time, I was living in the East Side. I was living in Stone Mountain, Georgia, and I just knew like there needed to be policy that would protect young people more so than funnel the school to prison pipeline. There needed to be investments in young people and young organizers to ensure that instead of building at that time, it was the new county jail in Stone Mountain. But for us, it was like, why aren't we investing in community? Why aren't we investing in community more so than investing in prisons, right, or in jails? So that's what really prompted me to get involved in the work. And for so long, it was always about just the advocacy piece for me and bringing awareness to these issues. But then as I got older, I started to realize the importance of policy change and how these things should be interchangeable.
I love that. Thank you. And I also kind of wanted to touch on, I guess me and you have always talked about like some of the struggles we have with being youth, organizers in certain spaces. Like, what are some of the challenges in your journey regarding advocacy work that you came across?
Yeah, I feel like it's always been a learning. It was always like a learning curve.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, when I really initially started the work, I would always realize that I was like the youngest person in the room, the youngest person in the space. It's when I would bring up like ideas or ways in which we can engage young people because I was a young person. It was just like a pat on the head and that's a great idea. Keep dreaming. You
Yeah.
know, like, we love this for you. But it was just like, no one's really listening to me. So as a young organizer, many of the challenges that I faced was being, one, listened to, and then two, being taken serious, because not only was I a young organizer, but I was also a young woman organizer. And, while places like Women Engaged should literally be nurtured and like, like
Yeah.
just cared for and tended to,
Hmm.
right? Like, that's not what every organizing space looks like. I wish that's what every organizing space looked like. Young, progressive women, intergenerational, right? Like Black women, right? But
Yeah.
that's not what organizing looks like, at many organizations across country. When I first started working, with the organization and doing this work, I was I was the youngest woman, but I was also, one of few women, right, that had a voice. And even then, in some of those rooms, I really learned that I didn't. So I felt like one of the things that I really had to overcome was my fear of speaking up. And that really didn't change for me until I went to Spelman College, that I began to like meet other young women who weren't afraid to just speak their truth. And I learned like the reason why I'm in these spaces and the reason why I'm doing this work in community, is because, one, I do care for my community, right? But then
Hmm.
also, it's important to have different voices in these spaces, and my voice matters. And I had to learn that. And now I love the fact that we're in an era where young people unapologetically aren't afraid to speak their truth, and they're doing it. And there's this whole, trend like, listen to Black women, support Black women. And now Patch has a lot to say too. But listen to Black women, support Black women. So I love that that's what we're experiencing. But I hope that continues.
Yeah. I love that. And I know I would say in the past 2 years we've been experiencing like youth organizers really reach out because they see how much we had an impact in the 2020 election. And I know me and you kind of touch on this a lot. Like, are youth, are young people ready to vote in this election? Are they excited to vote in this election? Because we had a big turnout, a couple of years ago, but now we're going into this election. It's kind of like, I don't know. So I kind of want to talk about what do you think are some of like young people's like I want to say reservations about voting in this election, and being advocates in this time. Yeah, where do you think that comes from?
You are literally going to get me in trouble, because every time I say this, like, the older organizers look at me like, well, we got to vote, and I'm just
Yeah.
like, but this is how they're feeling. Like, as a young person, um, and I work with young people as do you,
Mm-hmm.
we know the real reservations that young people have. One, we're in a time where, it's not a presidential election. So we know that Americans show up in large numbers when there is a presidential election.
Mm-hmm.
And the past presidential election in 2020 was the largest it was the largest voting turnout rate that we've ever seen. But we always know when it comes to like these state elections, 2 years later, there's always a slump. And I think what we're going to witness is a very, very large slump. But I think it just comes, one, naturally, because it isn't such a large election. A lot of people don't understand the importance of voting local, even though we're working our butts off, right, to ensure that they do, just like
Yeah.
we did for that runoff election. The work is being done to ensure that people do show up. But as regards to people's reservations for wanting to turn out or wanting to show up, I mean, a lot of young people will tell you, um, well, I don't feel represented, right? I don't feel like my voice matters. And then after you witness that turnout, that historic youth turnout rate, a lot of young people are not as forgiving, or forgetful, right? When it comes to, these promises were made, but these promises weren't kept. And so I think promises that were made in 2020 that weren't kept, we're going to see in 2022. But I think that's when the work has to come a little harder, in the sense to where we have to remind people that, while these promises were made in 2020, like, the real work happens at the state and local level. And this is where you're really going to see things that impact your day-to-day life,
Mm-hmm.
such as your state. Everyone in Georgia is running for office right now. I feel like everyone in every seat in Georgia is up, right? So like when it comes to your state elected officials or your governor or your secretary of state, like
Yeah.
these are the things that really matter. And these are the things, this is why you have to show up. So I think a lot of people who don't know how these positions impact them are going to feel like, I voted in 2020, nothing happened, I'm not going to vote. But it's up to us to be like, no, like, yeah, you voted in 2020. Thank you for doing that. But 2022, like these state elections, we need you to turn up because this is how it can impact you.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And we have the power to hold elected officials accountable. And I think that that's something that people tend to forget. Like, if you don't like them, kick them out.
And here's my thing. Not only do we have the power to hold them accountable, but we have the power to run against them. I feel like oftentimes as young people, we see ourselves as good enough to just participate on these people's campaigns, right? And volunteer our time and give them amazing social media strategies and ways in which they can engage with young people. When the truth is, the best way to engage with young people is for you to put yourself out there and for you to run. And we're starting to see more and more young people run for office. And I always use this analogy. I remember when we were running, we were talking about like police reform. You know, we were organizing these marches around Breonna Taylor and police violence in this country. And across many states, it was like the city councils and the local governments that were having these meetings about how we're going to be utilizing our city budget, and are we going to give more money to like city police, or are we going to give more money to like building our community and kind of thinking more so on the community policing level. And many of these elected officials that looked like us, that were Black, but have been in these positions of power for 20 and 30 years, literally sitting on the city council for 20 and 30 years, decided not to do that. And I was telling them, like, city council, you're 24 years old, you can run for city council and you can win. And we've seen young people do that in other states. And I believe it is time for a power shift at the local level. And I think once you begin to see that, and once other people begin to see that, and young people begin walking in their power and their purpose, then we'll start seeing change at the local level. So one, not only do I want y'all to begin to continue to go to the polls and vote, but I want you to be thinking about ways in which you can hold elected office and be the voice or the change that you want to see if you feel like our elected officials just aren't doing that.
I love that. That's something that's always been a constant with Mary. She'll always say, "You can run." I remember was it 2 years ago? You
It
were
was
always talking
2
about
years
that.
ago. We were literally on the ground,
Yes,
like organizing in Kentucky and Atlanta. And I'm like, run for office, like school board, like city council, join a board, like something
yes,
within your government and begin to disrupt. A lot of people will say, we want to get rid of all these systems. I get it. But I also feel like historically we've seen that there are different people for different things within this movement. And so
mhm.
there are going to be people advocating on the outside saying we need to change these systems and we need to get rid of them. But then there also needs to be people who are willing to use themselves to disrupt these systems. Like now, he's much older, right? But when I think about like Martin Luther King and then like Andrew Young and like all of these people, many of them knew what their bodies were used for. Some of them were just for marching. Some of them were mobilizing voters. Some of them were making phone calls. And others were like, no, you got to run for office. You have to be the one in the meeting with the president demanding for us while we're outside, demanding for us on the outside. Like there's different layers. And so I love the fact that our work kind of gets to like highlight what those different layers are and allow young people to figure out where they fit into the political space, because there's space for all of us.
I love that. I just saw a documentary on Shirley Chisholm, and that kind of relates like that same message. Like she knew where she wanted to be. She knew she wanted to change the system. So she was like, I'm going to insert myself into it, and I'm going to be my authentic self and not switch anything up. So I love that. And I know we kind of touched about like, you know, the concerns of, the youth and voting in this election, and, promises that weren't made or weren't kept. Uh, I want to know, what are some things that you, and I guess other people around you, other youth organizers, were wanting to see and would like to see in these elections regarding, we could just say state stuff that's going on, but also like maybe even federally. Like, what are some things that you think youth people, policies and laws that young people would like to see on the table?
So first of all, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this.
Mhm.
If we in Georgia did not turn up to vote in 2020 in that 2021 runoff, like we wouldn't have seen the first Black woman appointed to the Supreme Court. So I literally I'm just like, when I even think about it, I'm like, we did that. Like the organizing that Black women in Georgia did in 2020 and 2021, we literally did that. But when it comes to things that we wanted to see or wish we saw, or what we were wanting from elected officials, is one, young people are like, where is our student loan forgiveness? Where is the free college? Where are these things that we were promised? Where is the paid family leave? Where are these things that we were promised? Black people are like, what happened to the police reform? Did that conversation just fall off the face? Like, no, this is our life. Where is it? So these are the things that we're wanting to see, but specifically as relates to Georgia specifically, get your hands off of our voting rights. Like every single day, it's a fight or a concern every year to wonder if, you know, our state elected officials are going to continue to try to hammer away at our voting rights or our rights to show up to the polls. And I feel like we've had this conversation before, but many of our elected officials are so busy with trying to ensure that they can control who can vote, instead of trying to appease all of Georgia's voters and voting for us, right? Or developing policies for us. So these are things that we want to see at both the state and the federal level. So we want more investments in historically Black colleges and universities, and that is at both the federal and the state level. States such as Tennessee and Maryland and others have actually received lawsuits from HBCUs because they were not receiving their adequate funding that they were supposed to be sending to our institutions. And so these are different things that I think a lot of people don't necessarily think about, or they do think about, but they don't know that their elected officials have the opportunity or the wherewithal to change it. Other things such as environmental justice. I mean, people within Black communities have been talking about this more and more, which I'm happy about, when it becomes to just like waste and other things, specifically in the state of Georgia, just thinking more about environmental justice and what that means, as well as equitable housing, and gentrification and displacement happening in places like Atlanta.
Yeah, that's
A lot. It's heavy.
it is.
It's heavy. It's a lot. It's a lot. But this is what we're asking for, and this is their job. This is their job. And
Their job. It's so fun because I was talking to some people on my team about the student loans, and I was like, it's up to God at this point, because I don't know how that's gonna get paid, but that's not me. That's not on me.
It's tough. That was my research in college, and it's so amazing how the system is and how it differs for different people, in a sense to where, like, specifically using student loans as an example, Black people can't even get a credit card or like a business loan, but you can get a $30,000 to $60,000 student loan in a drop of a dime. And so the Americans that utilize student loans the most are African Americans, and beyond that, the average African American owes $50,000 or more in student loan debt. When they end up graduating from college, because of the racial wealth gap, because of the gender wealth gap in this country, they're not able to literally sustain their lives and pay off this tremendous, enormous amount of student loan debt. And the longer they have it, the more it accumulates interest, recently did an interview with someone who said that they're like $25,000 student loan debt has reached like $300,000 due to their inability to pay for it. And I'm like, that happens. And so that keeps the most marginalized groups in poverty, right? And so like you get this education and, you're in a good position. And many people think because you have this title now, you have the money. What is I know? Uncle Sam has to get his money in taxes and in the student loan. It's a lot. So yeah, it's very, very heavy. It's very heavy.
Definitely.
We're impacted as people of color in many different ways in different parts of the system.
That's yes, because I think about how Black men are the most educated demographic in the United States, but then we have, the racial wealth gap, the gender wealth gap, and then all of those, and then of course, if we have student loans, it's hard for us to own a house, and now we have that issue. So now we can't have ownership, but now we owe $100,000 in student loan. Like, it's so deep, and like you said, like it's heavy, it's multifaceted, like there's so many factors into it. It is insane, but like I said, it's up to God at this point.
Yeah.
The loans, but it's not me. It's not me. But thank you like so much for bringing that up. And I know this is kind of like not, I mean, it's on topic, but I wanted to ask you about this because we talked about like advocacy and how to get your voice out there, but I would love to kind of talk about your advocacy at Spelman. So people, if any young people are listening, how they can, fight for things on their campus. Because I know we see a lot in the AUC with housing issues, food insecurity, and just a lot of other stuff too. And it has something to do with not adequate funding in our HBCUs. But I would love to kind of touch on your history with student advocacy.
Oh Lord, I love my dear Spelman College. But yes, I definitely raised a lot of hell there. In one sense, at that time, I was paying about $48,000 a year, and now that price has gone up to probably around $55,000. Patch is getting upset about it. Probably around $52,000 to $55,000 a year.
Okay, so okay. Patch is getting angry.
Yeah, around $50,000 to $55,000 a year in student loan debt. No, now he's flustered me. About $52,000 to $50,000 a year now for students to go to Spelman College, and the fact that like these girls are going to school and they don't even have anything to eat. And at that time I was over the National Action Network chapter at Spelman, and many of the girls, we realized that there was a need financially for some of our students, and so we developed this scholarship where we had Black women from different backgrounds in Atlanta that would donate $500 a month of their personal income to support students. And so we would give a $2,000 scholarship each month away to just students. And all they had to do was like develop a 15 to 20-second video about what they'd use the money for, and why. And really the reoccurring theme was like, the last thing they would say is, and because I'm hungry. It was like, I gotta pay for books. I have a kid. Like, I'm taking care of my family. I don't have housing. And the last thing I do is think about food. And I'm like, that is literally the one thing that you shouldn't have to think about. And so we ended up organizing, trying to figure out how we could access food and basic needs for students at on campus. And we were met with resistance. And so we had to organize almost 2-week hunger strike on campus. And it did kind of push the fire underneath our administration. And what we ended up getting after that was free meal swipes for students who couldn't afford meal plans on campus. But I see that we have a question from the audience. Are we able to go there?
Yes, go ahead. So go ahead.
You can ask.
Okay. All right, I'll ask. So, what have been some of your favorite parts about being politically involved on the collegiate level?
What have been some of my favorite parts about? Really? Okay. So a lot of people see being young as kind of like, people see being young as a liability instead of being an asset. But in college, I
Mm.
saw being young as an asset instead of a liability. Because I'm like, if you can't like just speak your mind and organize and be radical in college, then when can you be or like radical? So for me, that was like my favorite part about being politically involved on the collegiate level.
Mhm.
And I feel like, at that time in my life, I personally was getting knowledge and learning and receiving like this education and like like it was opening my eyes to new things and different ideals that I never or different parts of our society like I never really thought about. And like it taught me about the history of how young people my age and other parts of the world were organizing. Um, and I was just like, wow, like I see that we're doing great work, but like we have nothing on the kids in South Africa that were like literally laying their bodies down for freedom, like, and so it really like opened my eyes to those movements and that work that was not only being done like in history, but was also being done right now. Um, yeah, but I feel like that had to be my favorite part about being politically involved on the collegiate level. But I'm interested in hearing from you, Zoe, because now I'm in grad school. Like I'm old. I'm the old girl at the party. I want to know
No, you're not.
what you love about being politically involved on the collegiate level.
I guess for me, like, it's just meeting like-minded people who are like in the same age group. Like because I kind of grew up at Spelman. That's how I basically got into that like radical Black feminist mindset, was from Spelman, and from like Dr. Beverly and Dr. K and all those people. And I mean, I love them, but they're like, like 50 years older than me, 40, 50 years older than me. So it was nice to meet people who are in my same like generation, who share the same ideals and are like, we want to join in on this fight with you. Like, this is something that we're very like interested in advocating for. And I love that. And I think that it's just meeting like-minded people, but also, like, for example, my brother, he's at Morehouse, he's a freshman, and he's been texting me because he's been wanting to try to get more involved on campus. So he's been looking at different groups and organizations to join. And he was like, Zoe, I want to be a part of something that's like really community based, and I want to fight for something. And me and him were just having a conversation about this last night, because he was like, we have to do something about this Cop City. Like, he was like angry because he thought he saw all the connections that Cop City had with like the AUC and all this stuff. So he was like, I want to do something about it. And I was like, well, you're at the perfect place to do something about it. You're at the
Yeah.
AUC. You're at the perfect place. So it's just wonderful to be around people who are in the same age group, but you have so many different experiences where you can come together and figure out how to make a change together. So that's my favorite part.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that question though.
Yeah, me too. It made me
Um,
reminisce.
and I kind of want to, like, we talked about, being around people who are like-minded and, want to fight for change with you. But I want to know how we can continue to kind of bridge the gap between our generation and older generations as we continue the work. Because of course, we may have different mindsets. We may have different, I know we all have the same end goal, but we all may have different ways in how to reach that end goal. So I'm wondering, how do you think we can continue to bridge that gap?
Honestly, I feel like that work is definitely being done when I think about women like Helen Butler, and Melanie Campbell and others. I think it does need to be a more intentional and concentrated effort. But I think, and I always tell people this, Georgia is the example. I think, when you come into organizations like Women Engaged and you go to places like, Georgia Stand Up or others, that work is being done and you can see it in the work. So I just think people need to continue to look at us as the example because it's happening,
Yes.
right? Women Engaged is the model.
I love that. Yes, one thing about Ms. Butler and my boss here at Women Engaged, Malika Redmond, they're always like, "Where the young people at? What the young people got to say.
And like giving you opportunities. And I honestly can tell you, working with Miss Helen, there's never been a time where I've had some like an idea or I've come to her and asked her something and I heard the word no. Well, okay. I probably have come up like there's been some time I once or twice. There has been some times she was like, "Girl, no, we not doing that."
But it's all
Yeah,
in good faith.
like,
It's
but
all in
honest,
good
but then
faith.
that's also cultural because she's like, "Girl, we not going to that club trying to get them voters. Like this is a
Yeah.
Christian organization." And I'm like, Miss Helen, these the voters we need. Like so we've had these talks, but we always meet each other literally in the middle. But honestly, there's never been an idea or a thought or like, if it's good, she's always just like, well, let's do it. Like, why not? Let's try. And so I really, really appreciate that about her. And again, I love how like we're starting to see how intentional organizations are being. But when I look at the work being done in like the young women from these places, I always realize that it's actually happening in organizations that are run by Black women. I feel like they're the ones that are being the most intentional about ensuring that intergenerational piece, and providing young Black women with a voice in a space.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that. And I want to know, like, how do we continue to like engage young people and hope for an even better turnout this election and even future elections? Um, yeah, like how do you think we can continue to keep that hope alive?
Yeah, and senses of keeping that hope alive, I think there are several things that we can do.
Mhm.
One, young people are really moved by issues, right? And so sharing with them the issues that impact them that are literally on their ballots right now. For me, voting rights is that issue. And so I think highlighting different things, but that's for me, right? That'll move me. That may not move someone else. And so sharing with them the issues, right? Like CRT. They love CRT. Oh, CRT. That's on the ballot right now. Like, come on. Like tell these kids the history. Like,
Yes.
like that's on the ballot right now. Other issues that are literally impacting our communities. I feel like that's gonna push young voters to turn out. And then also, I honestly feel like the right candidate will always push young people to turn out. And it's all about ensuring that, spaces like this or even other organizations, we have a responsibility to share the platforms of these people running for office so that our students can make um, intentional decisions. Of course, we are all nonpartisan organizations and we support, young people just showing up and going to the polls, right? And
Mhm.
as nonpartisan organizations, sharing with our communities who is running for these positions so that they can make the best decision for their communities. Because a lot of people just don't know the candidates, right? They don't even know. I remember during the 2020 election, Daniel Blackman was running, and they were like, "What is a public service commission?" There was no reason why he shouldn't have won, especially because we turned Georgia blue, but they did not know what a public service. So there are some people who don't even know what a Secretary of State is. You could
Yeah.
say, the Secretary of State, and they would not even know who the Secretary of State is or why that position is important. So just ensuring that we're sharing with them these platforms, who's running, and allowing them to make decisions on why they should show up, and using these issues to tell them why it's important for them to go vote.
Yes, I love that. And it's crazy. I was looking up like what's on the ballot coming up and I was a little confused. I was like agricultural commission. It was like all these different things and I was like, what is this? So I even had to look it up cuz I was
Yeah,
like,
so someone asked like about what does it mean with an issue being on the ballot, and you mentioned like agricultural commission, right? And
mhm,
so when you think about environmental justice and you think about how that impacts your communities, don't you want someone who's a part of the agricultural community to support Black farmers, and support environmental justice and rights for people on the like public service commission? Like, don't you want a judge who is going to be fair, and is going to ensure that it is going to be fair, in using the law, and is not going to use biased and racist ideals to give you more time than they would someone who had a lighter complexion than you. Like,
Mhm.
these are the things that we mean as regards to issues being on the ballot and why it's important for you to turn up. I mentioned, and I'll keep mentioning, voting rights when it comes to Secretary of State, and even our state elected officials, people who like state representatives and state senate, right? These things such as voting rights. It's on the ballot when you're voting for these people, right? Like, voting rights is on our ballot here in Georgia, and in order to protect our voting rights, that means that you need to show up and turn up to the polls to ensure that we have the votes enough to protect it. And so many people have this idea, right, that because we showed up the way we did during the 2020 and 2021 election, that Georgia's blue. Well, the hard fact is, while Georgia be blue to everyone else in the world, when we come to Georgia, it's just not that way.
No.
Um, it's just not that
No.
way. And again, we are nonpartisan organizations. We do not support candidates. We do
Mhm.
not. So we are not that way,
No.
right? But
Yes.
there's a misconception on what Georgia is, and preconceived notions on the values of Georgia. So on the outside, it looks completely different than it does really on the inside on the state level. And so if you want change that you thought you would see at the federal level by electing certain people, you're not going to see that change because it doesn't look like it does on the local level, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Yes.
Yeah.
And I know we just we had a episode where we kind of talked about like legislative updates and what's going on at the Georgia legislative, and there was a question regarding like, because at Women Engaged we are a reproductive justice organization, so we were talking about like paid medical leave for like pregnant individuals, or like abortion access and all that stuff. Like, you have to, there's so many things that you have to take in consideration when you go to the polls. Like, I know, like you said, for you is like voter advocacy. That's something that's really important. Somebody else, it could be abortion access, or it could be protecting trans kids and kindergarten through 12th grade, and letting them um participate in sports with the gender that they align with. Like, there's so many different things that are always in question. Like, we always have to be on the lookout for, because what's happening in Texas could be happening here. What's happening in Florida could be happening here. So we have to, continue to go out to to ensure that those things don't happen. So we don't get a, don't say gay bill here or anything crazy like that. So we have to make sure we're, of course, nonpartisan, not supporting any candidates or parties, but making sure that we have people in office who align with our views and who can protect us regardless of gender, class, race, sex, etc. So I love that. Thank you. And I kind of want to just talk about like, what are next steps do you think in youth voter advocacy? I mean, what would you give other people, like other youth organizers, like advice on how they can get involved and how they can advocate on their campus or even with friends and family?
Yeah, I think it one just starts with the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what we learned a lot during the 2020 and 2020 elections, when we were in the middle of a pandemic, and many organizations really had to just reevaluate their structure and focus a lot on relational organizing. It worked in 2020. I believe that's going to continue to work for us. Continuing to, you are you are the expert in your community, right? Like, you know what's best for your community. And so when you are aware that there's an election coming up and you're doing your research, you're the best person to relay why your community should show up to the polls. So utilizing relational organizing efforts, as well as meeting young people where they are, right? Like, don't be afraid to go to where young people are and encourage them to turn up to the polls, because many people like see voter education or voter access as like this very unsexy thing, right? But like, no, this can be a very, we can make voter education and voter organizing sexy. Like,
Yes.
let's do it and let's try. And I think it's important for us to continue to think outside the box with how we encourage and engage young people and young organizers or young students on campus.
I love that. And what would you tell older generations that want to support young people and may not know how to, or they're just getting started, like they want to figure out how they can get involved? What would you say to them?
I would say be open to change, be open to ideas. And, young, like I said, you are the expert within your community. And I feel like younger people know how to speak to younger people, and older organizers know how to speak to older organizers, and collectively we can speak to our communities. So be open to change, be open to new ideas, but then also be open to partnership.
I love that. And I guess for you, like, what are you excited about in these next coming elections? What are you hoping for? And yeah, like, what are you excited and hoping for?
I'm hoping that, let me tell you, I feel like we have not had a break in Georgia. I feel like the 2020 election came, everyone else was breathing, we were still working in 2021,
Mm-hmm.
and now it's 2022 and we still working. So this is what I'm looking forward to. I am looking forward to organizing my community, doing the work that needs to be done, and then in 2023, breathing. Because then in 2024, we got to get right back to work. So yeah. But also I'm looking forward to seeing, I feel like the world's going to be watching us. They have since 2020. And so I look forward to continuing to show them that the South, right, can mobilize, we can organize like we have done time and time again before. But then also, I'm looking forward to show them how beneficial intergenerational organizing is, what that looks like. And I kind of feel like Georgia is becoming, and it is like kind of like the blueprint of what like I feel like the organizing that we did in 2020, you're going to see happening in other states. But I think what we do in 2022 is going to put a stamp on how the entire country mobilizes in 2024.
Yes, and not to toot our own horn, but I feel like Georgia has always been the blueprint.
Oh, I'm gonna toot our horn. I'm gonna toot our horn, and let me tell you, in Georgia, it was all run, and I was screaming that to the top of my lungs. It was all run and organized and spearheaded by Black women. When you look at every voting rights organization, from the ACLU to Women Engaged to the Georgia Coalition for the People's Agenda to Fair Fight, it is all run by Black women. So I'm screaming to the rooftops. I need the world to know.
Period. So
that's the sauce.
Yes. So you see it, pay us.
Yes.
Pay Black women
a livable wage.
A livable wage. Cancel student debt.
Yes.
And appreciate us and listen to us.
Yes.
Obviously we have the right idea.
Yes.
Obviously. But awesome. Thank you so much. I guess I'm kind of like done with the voting aspect. I would love to kind of hear about, you said the past 3 years we've been working. Yeah. I mean, we've kind of been working our entire lives, but the past 3 years we've been working. So I want to know, like, what do you do to like take care of yourself? Like, what's some self-care stuff you like to do?
So let me tell you, I have not practiced self-care in the sense in which I wish I did. Now, you told everybody on this call that I was 22. We're going to stick with that. I'm 22. But I have other friends in my life that have, I'm 22, y'all. I'm 22. But I have other friends in my life that have like utilized their 20s and lived. And when I think about the fact that 2 years ago, I was in my early 20s and I was mobilizing and organizing during elections. And I'm still doing the same thing. And that's super important, right? That's work that I love doing and that I'm happy to do. But at the same time, I never took a break. I never took that beat. And so I think I need to be more intentional about rest and what that means, because you can't be an organizer and you can't, like, how can anyone look to you as a leader if you're not taking care of yourself? Like, how can you tend to community if you're not tending to yourself? And so I'm still learning that, and I'm going to practice that this summer. I'm going to live that unapologetically. I literally told a coach of mine today that everyone's talking about living this soft life. You know, I don't want to. I don't want to. I don't want to have. To, I don't. I want to live that. I want to. I want to experience that. Right.
Yeah.
And so, and I want to show like you can be an organizer and be in community and live a soft life too. Right. It doesn't have to
Mm-hmm.
just be in, you know, corporate America or, you know, like, no, you can be in community, be an organizer and live a soft life too. And I want to figure out and explore what that means, that looks like. Whether that's during my work or even in my personal life with the relationships that I have, if that's with my friendships or even my romantic relationships. Yeah.
I love that. Yes,
My
lead us.
boyfriend who's watching too. I was like, you have to turn in. He's asking questions.
I love,
Um,
yes. Have a great support system. That's a part of having,
yes.
a good self-care routine. I definitely need to like get back into it. I turn my phone off sometimes, like at night when I know I'm no longer working. I did everything I need to do. I call
I
my
need to
mom. I'm
do
tell
that.
her,
I
hey,
I
hey
need to
mom,
learn.
hey mom, I'm turning my phone off for the night. I'll call you in the morning so you know I'm alive. And that's all I do. And I just
Listen,
turn my phone off. I turn
you
on.
know me. You know Kathy's not going for that one. If I turn my phone off, my mom will call the next door neighbor and have them knock on the door and come answer it. I can't get away with
Yeah,
that one.
my mom. I'm kind of shocked. She's a helicopter mom, but I guess now she says I'm grown. I don't think I'm grown, but she says, "Oh, you grown now, so you got it." And I'm like, "Dang, okay." But that's how like I'm practicing self care. I'll watch like Netflix and YouTube and all that stuff, but I
But
need to
see,
live a soft life.
my problem with my mom is we are both addicted to each other. So when my mom tries to turn off her phone, I'm blowing her up. And when I turn off, we have a really weird
No,
codependency
I
thing.
love that. No, I always tell my mom I don't make any decision without calling her first.
Yeah.
Anything that I need to do and I need to get a double check, I always call her because she
Yes.
gonna know.
Yeah.
Even if she don't know, she'll be like, "Okay, well, I support you in doing this," and that's all I need to hear.
Yeah.
All I need to hear. But we have another question from the chat. You may have already discussed this, but what are some of the ways that young people engage and support each other to vote, whether they are on a campus or not? In other words, when life experiences are different.
Again, I would have to say the relational organizing piece.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, despite the fact that life experiences are different, when you're on that college campus, you realize or begin to realize the you begin to realize ways in which you're more so alike than different. And for me, I guess it was a little different experience because I was on a campus with Black women, despite the fact that we all came from different walks of life, right? Like we still had forms of diversity amongst us. So I felt like we realized that we were more alike than different. But I feel like when you are on a college campus, and you're experiencing student hunger because you live in a food desert and the cafeteria is closed at 4 o'clock, we're all going through that. When you realize that you may be at an institution in the middle of nowhere, right? In like Florida, or, you know, I think about like, I went on a HBC tour. So I'm thinking about all the schools like Central State University and like Wilberforce and like these beautiful historic Black institutions that literally are in the middle of nowhere. And they're experiencing food deserts. They have agricultural and land issues. They don't have much funding. So you begin to see ways in which you're more similar than different, and you mobilize around those. I always tell you the best way to organize is to think about the issue that's important to all of us. And when you begin to think about these issues, that's when you begin to highlight ways in which we're more similar than different, and you utilize those issues to show people why they should care and how they can bring attention or awareness to this and how they can incorporate policy. So on a campus level, right, while we were fighting for student hunger and food insecurity, we were able to implement campus policy, right? Like you can, it starts it starts small and then it works its way up. So like when you begin to think about issues impacting your college campus, don't be afraid to implement like campus wide policy, right? And then using that to peel back the onion to go to state or local policy, and then using that to peel back the onion and go literally the organizing that I did at Spelman around student hunger and basic needs is the reason why I work with Rise today. Like, I didn't even know about student hunger, student homelessness, student basic needs before I went to Spelman. And when I went to my first real college conference where we were talking about these issues, I went in the room and there were like literally 5 Black people out of like 700 attendees. And it was like older white people that were professors and like grad students that were talking about this. And I'm like, a sophomore, junior, and at Spelman, and I'm like, where are all the Black people at? And not only where all the Black people at, but like where are the people that are representing HBCUs? It wasn't, and there was no one there in that space to advocate for us. And so that's why I really began working with Rise and began talking about like student basic needs, and how it impacts not only Black students at universities and colleges across the country, but also historically Black colleges and universities, because we have specific needs that we have to address. And
Yeah.
how needs can contribute to voting and why we should turn up to the polls.
I love that you touched on that, because I think we fail to realize, like, even like, I think everybody, that life isn't supposed to be this way. I think that I was watching a video and it was like, what were these they're all adults now, like in their 40s, 30s and 40s, but they were like, what was their favorite struggle meal in college? Why are we struggling in college? That's like the whole point. I was like, we should not be eating ramen noodles every day, or like stretching, ramen noodles out for a month because you can't afford to get food from campus or to get groceries or anything like that. So I think that's something else that I think is a common thing. Like, we shouldn't struggle while we're getting we shouldn't struggle, period, first. But we also shouldn't struggle while we're getting our education, while we're trying to further ourselves. And I love that you touched on that. Even though we may come from different walks of life, we all have something in common. Always. Even if we don't expect it. Like, it can be somebody across the street from me. I don't know what we could have Game of Thrones in common. And that's how we start off. Like, it's like little things. But on college campuses, we all want to eat. We all want to live in a secure dorm with no black mold, with no crazy stuff growing out of the vents. We want to
all want to be able to afford to come here.
Yes, and not worry about how we're going to pay for this semester.
Yeah.
Yes, we all have the same worries when we're in school, and we also want to make sure we secure a job when we get out, because the student loans don't wait for nobody. So I think that's a wonderful thing that you brought up. Like, we all have something in common.
Yeah.
In every space. If you go to a HBCU, if you go to a PWI, technical college, it doesn't matter. We all have something in common. We're all here for a reason. So, yeah, awesome. Well, if there's no other questions in the chat, I think we are done for today.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Zoe. I really, really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing what we're able to do in Georgia over the course of the next few months leading up until the end of our 2022 election season in Georgia.
Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Mary. I really, really appreciate you. I've been wanting to have you on the show for the longest, so I'm glad we were able to get it all under control. But thank you all for watching You Ask, We Answers. My name is Zoe. I'm the community and youth organizer here at Women Engaged, and I will see you next Friday. Bye.